Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 69. Again, we'll give you a look into our week ahead and we'll give you some of our analysis updates, and we'll also contrast our analysis from last week as well. So we are going to give gold and euro USD a look at tomorrow, but we'll start off with NZD USD. So what we were looking at through last week was a potential push towards the upside and then that fall off in price. So what actually ended up happening was price had that acceleration towards the downside, and really what I'm looking out for still is these two moves. So I do think that we could have this retracement all the way up towards the upside, so within this range. And what we saw through last week was just that drop off. So we're still testing these lows here for a potential support, but I'm seeing that because price didn't actually retrace up, make some sort of push up higher, and then we could have a turnover. That's what we were looking at last week. So in theory, I feel like this scenario could definitely happen potentially this week. So what we could be looking out for is essentially price. Oops, let me just extend this. So essentially price to push up just a little bit higher, potentially into 0.705. We could then start to watch for some sort of reactions and watch this kind of exhaust, because the overall momentum is towards the downside. We do have this, this range bound market here. So if we were to kind of, take a step back and think where the overall trend is, I believe that there is a potential continuation lower. So that's why my thoughts are, within this range here from this high to this low, we could have some sort of creation where we start to find some rejections in between and then start to fall off towards the downside. So potentially ending into 0.69 as a target. So if we were to get from 0.75 to 0.69, again, a good 100 or so pips there, and personally for me, that's a very good amount of reward for me. So the other scenario that we could expect or could potentially see is for price to peak over the 0.71 margin level, and where it's created this high already, we could see some potential manipulation here. So in this sense, where we start to see price push higher and it continues to push higher, in order for us to take a sell, we need to be confident that we have that bearish pressure being coming into the market. So we're not going to rush any sells if we start to break above here, and that's probably the most important key part of breaking above a structure level, is to wait for a strong candle towards the downside or in the direction that we're looking at. So in our case, we are looking for a sell. So in order for us to be convinced that the price is moving lower, we need to wait for this strong candle, a strong candle, to drop. And that could be convincing us to get in on a sell, and we just take an entry based on a small retest at any given point. So we just have to wait for that for us to get in a proper signal. So again, if price does start to push up higher, that's not really a problem. We have more reward to cover. So 0.71 to the downside is just under 200 pips or so. And if we're able to get a retrace here, this will be a nice 100 pip move. So either way, we can still prepare from the upside or the downside. It just depends what the market wants to give us. So now moving on to AUD USD. So last week, what I was looking at was a potential target for 0.74, and we can see that price had clearly got into this, but it's now started to retrace. But what we were anticipating was for price to make some sort of retracement higher and then to push lower. So seeing as we've now hit that 0.4 level, we can now potentially play within the 0.676 range and the 0.74 range. So what I'm looking at for now is pretty much this continuation play, and essentially it's just going to be something similar towards the NZD USD. So in terms of potential target, we could be looking at 0.73, but just to be safe, I'm just going to look at taking price into 0.74. So within this, we could be looking at a lower time frame or just pretty much a retracement towards the upside. You know, if we start to hit the 618 fib, so we have these two areas that we can look into. So, you know, potentially, you know, crossing the 0.618 level, we could, you know, pretty much come to a conclusion at 0.7555. So this range that we could have some sort of area where we have a rejection. So, you know, we could be looking at, in particular, these areas for where price could push lower. I'm not saying exactly we'll go here, but, you know, we could look in this range bound where there's that 618 fib lies, and if we were to go from here to the low, a good 100 pips or so. So again, sticking with my bias of price pushing lower, I think we do have that ability to push and extend lower. We just have to wait and see exactly what price is willing to do. So yeah, so moving on to USDJPY. So for this, what we were looking at through the last previous weeks or so, as we've seen price, you know, really get really close towards our uptrends. We've got some intermediate ones, so we can get rid of this now that we've broken it really strongly. So we do have some really strength coming into play here. So what I'm going to be looking out for is potential plays for either a push up, because what I was mentioning last week was a potential fake out if we start to see you know, price really start to reject some points of here. But as you can see, price action hasn't really done so, and this could be a nice potential manipulation point. So if this starts to push higher, you know, I'm going to be keeping an eye on this on lower time frames, potentially the 1 hour or 15, and it could look something like this, where price starts to, you know, push lower and then starts to push higher. Now, if this happens and we start to see some strength push into play, we could potentially start to see price break towards this high that we've made at nearly at 112. So 112, you know, if we start to see price pushing higher and we start to see strength, it would be wise to get in on this move and on all the way up. So, you know, potentially we can play from 109.5, where we are right now, to this low, and see if we can look at some potential retesting options. Because if we start to see price, you know, do this, where price, you know, retraces lower a bit and then starts to, you know, find some rejections on here, and then we have some bearish pressure, then it will set us up for a potential sell. So I hope you can see why we could be looking at potential both plays here, because we can cover our ourselves from both options. So having a buy potential scenario, and if we're able to get in here and ride this all the way up into the critical level of, you know, this retest point, this can give us some sort of, you know, potential warning of a sell opportunity. So if we can find price to reject the uptrend here, followed by that momentum, then we could be looking at some sells, and we could possibly look for those continuations lower. That could be one argument. Or the other is that if we fail to have any rejections here and we see price just obliterate and completely become bullish again, then we should be, in theory, safe, and we should be able to, you know, ride this all the way up to the upside for a good 150 pips or so. So yeah, covering both ends on this one, I think that's the best possible play here, because we are in the indecisiveness of this market. So yeah, it really just depends what is up and coming, and again, price action will be the foretell of the you know, of our bias, and that's where we need to focus our attention, really. So looking at CADJPY, so again, what we looked at here was a potential sell-off opportunity. We can see price completely obliterated and pushed lower. So moving on through this week's you know, price action, what I'm keen to see here is to see if price is going to do one or two things. If we're going to see, you know, price push up here, do something like this, and that would be, you know, our potential entry point. Essentially is just having this retest point. So, you know, this could be, you know, this could look like this. You know, it really just depends where this retracement occurs. Okay, so it depends where, you know, if it does start to go deep, then, you know, that's where we'll look for those buys. But if it's really, you know, quite strong and bullish, then the retracement might not be so deep. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So I'll get rid of this just for clarity's sakes. But anyway, we're essentially looking for buying opportunities, and we're going to be playing around this area here. So within 91.5, so 91.5 and 87.5. So within this range, I believe it's around a good few pips or so, so around 400 pips or so. Within this area, we're going to try and create some moves within this, so that, you know, within this we can get 100 or so pips. And personally for me, that's a good enough reward for me. You know, I don't like to do anything crazy in the markets. I just like to go for simple reward. The other scenario that we are potentially looking out for is again that so looking at this continuation of price action, right? So this is the only thing that's worrying me about having a buy scenario. Again, with our EJ, was it EJ? Sorry, USDJPY, having both different scenarios in mind. Yeah, so both scenarios in mind where we could have the upside move. And likewise here, I want to display another move which is potential towards a downside. So what that could look like again is something like this, where price has the ability to do something like this, where price does this and then drops off. So in two sets of minds, we could be looking at, you know, a buying opportunity and a sell opportunity. So if we can get this, so this would be the buy opportunity and then this would be the sell opportunity, but it's not essentially where price starts to you know, starts to reject and then we enter. We need to wait for price action to, you know, be clear. So that's again essentially waiting for price action to have this strong move towards the downside before we can even consider any move of entering and taking a sell. So in that sense, that gives us a nice hedge of our opportunities, because if we fail to get any rejections, then we'll already be taking some buys, and that would hopefully place us in a nice position, and it can give us a nice opportunity to take some reward. And likewise, again, if we start to see, you know, momentum pushing up higher and it starts to go slower and weaker, and we start to see momentum drop, we could then actually take a look at taking some sells. So again, it really just depends what price action does, and then we can move forward, because if we take those sells, we can move this trade, move our buy position into a break even, and hopefully at this point, if we can stretch it into, you know, for 100 pips or so, we'll take our reward, and then we can look at taking a sell if we start to see that bearish pressure kick in. If not, we will start to see, you know, price, you know, rocket higher and higher, and that's where we can trail our stop losses and just, you know, move accordingly. But again, yeah, having a hedge opportunity, you know, it gives us the best opportunities to get in on both ways of the market and not also lose out. So again, it really just depends on your preference. If you like to just go for the 100 pips or so, which I do, and then just close it no matter how far it rallies, you know, that's what I personally like to do. I don't care if it goes for another 2,000 pips. I've got my 100, I'm happy. I'm fine. Let's move on to the next position. That's always I go. But I know other people like to trail their stop losses, etc. And yeah, so it really just depends how you want to play the game. But yeah, so that's what my options are looking at for CADJPY. So moving on to EJ. So EJ, again, this one has been quite tricky. So what we were looking at for last week was a potential upside move. And unfortunately, we didn't really have any price action to indicate that whatsoever. So the possibilities that I'm looking at now is a potential continuation lower, and I don't really want to go too far down, because in terms of sell-off opportunity, in terms of like going all the way down here, I don't think price has that ability just yet. I think that price needs to have some sort of price move towards the upside, which we were expecting before. So what we could be looking at for this week is potential price to do something like this and take it towards the low of 129.5, and that's just really where I want to take price and look, you know, really be keen on looking into. So whether that price, you know, goes really high up and then drops lower, you know, that can still equally be valid. It really just depends what the market wants to do, guys. Really, I don't really want to give any indications where price could go to, you know, in terms of one like 132, 131. Essentially, the main concept here is just looking at a sell scenario and looking to take into 129.5. Again, you know, it really just depends how high it goes, because the higher it goes, the more reward we can get. So if I was to just say, you know, we were entering at price action right now and take a sell into 129.5, that's a good 120 odd so pips. So really just waiting for price to really show it needs to drop first, then we can take that sell. And remember guys, we're not impulsively taking a sell, we're waiting for price to do its thing and then getting in onto that. Okay, so that's pretty much where I stand with that. JPY, again, I'm looking at more continuations for price to drop. So again, looking for price to push up, potentially within this area of 785 to 76. So within this, you know, area, we could be waiting for price to push up just a little higher and then take its way into 75.5. Really, that's where I want price to go. Sorry. So yeah, so we're looking to target this range, and again, this could be a nice setup as well. Looking at AUDJPY, similar setup again. I don't really want to overcomplicate this, but we can see that price had made its way towards the upside. I was expecting price to do a bit more of a further up price before price action dropped off, but because we can see the second scenarios did start to push in, and yeah, there was a lot of opportunities in for this one. So moving on from this, I do want to see this happen again. So I think there is a possible continuation play up for grabs. Again, just waiting for this to happen. So whether the price, you know, really goes high in terms of this continuation, or we get a low one, it really just depends again on what the market wants to do. Again, these, you know, these turning points of the market, I don't really want to. These aren't any special significant areas, let me just tell you that. So these, you know, where I'm plotting the yellow zones there, they're just to indicate, you know, that it can happen within any of this range here. So from 84.5 to, you know, where price action is right now. So we're looking for either a short term, we might get a push up a little bit higher and then in a drop off, or we'll get a bit price to, you know, make its way up and then drop off. So either way, you know, we're still waiting for good amount of reward, and we're looking to go into 81, so a good 130 odd so pips. And obviously the higher it goes, the more pips it has potential towards the downside and more profits. So moving on to USDCHF. So this one, again, what we're looking out for is a potential retrace. We're looking for price to continue and push higher now. So we were looking at around 0.91. So this boxed off area, I believe I may have drawn a fib through this last week or so. I may have done so, but anyway, so we can see here we're roughly at the 38.2 and the 50% fib. So, you know, if we were to really clarify this, it could be around there. But yeah, I won't be surprised if price does now push up higher, because that's what I was looking for. So we could expect one push lower and then start to rally into 0.93. You know, that could be a nice target for price to really get into. Again, it really depends how far price wants to drop lower and then push up, but ultimately I'm just liking the way that this continuation of price action right now is really strong. I don't really want to go against that trend right now. I think that this has the ability to push higher, so a good 200 pips or so might be a good one to look out for. And finally, for this week's video, USD CAD. So for this, I'm looking for price to come around this range now. So as we can see, price is extended. I believe we do have some divergence right now, so that's nice to see. You know, price doing that and that. So price going higher and price going lower. So I hope that makes sense there. So really what I want to see is price to kind of, you know, drop off lower. I'm liking how price is really strong and pushing lower. So I think we just have to wait for price to kind of exhaust this, potentially retrace lower into 123.5 and then make its way to push up towards 1.26. So again, maybe we could have a good 200 pip trade in that one. It depends if you really want to hold on to that trade. So yeah, you have to be careful with those long-term trades, guys, because anything can happen. We get 1 4-hour candle and it can completely go the opposite way, and that can obviously affect your profit. So again, just make sure you're trading your plan. And also just wanted to clarify that these are just trading ideas. They're not concrete and they're not set in stone. Anything can happen within the week and during the week. So you have to be looking at the charts on a day-to-day basis, and critically looking at the markets and making sure that you understand what your game plan is every day. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover for this week's analysis video. Again, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, I do appreciate your time for watching, guys. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So thank you very much for listening, guys, and I appreciate your time for watching. We'll see you all in our next video.